Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and felt the alien ground beneath his boots for the first time. The planet Kepler 442b looked nothing like Earth. Purple grass swayed in the gentle breeze, and two suns hung in the orange sky like giant eyes watching everything below. The air smelled sweet, almost like flowers, but Jake knew better than to trust pretty things in space. His tactical armor made soft humming sounds as he walked toward the massive crystal building in the distance. The armor was heavy, but Jake had worn it so many times that it felt like a second skin. Inside his helmet, red and green lights blinked as the computer systems ran their checks. Everything was working perfectly. "Captain Morrison, do you copy?" The voice in his earpiece belonged to Commander Lisa Hayes, who was waiting back on the ship in orbit above the planet. "I copy, Commander. Just reached the surface. The building looks bigger than the pictures showed. Remember, Jake, this is our only chance. If these talks fail, we go to war with the Zephyrian Empire. Earth cannot win that war." Jake nodded even though she could not see him. He understood the weight on his shoulders. 3 billion humans were counting on him to make peace with aliens who had already destroyed 5 human colonies. The Zephyrians were stronger, faster, and had better weapons than humans. They also had 1,000 worlds under their control, while humans had barely 20. The crystal building rose up like a mountain made of glass. Jake could see strange symbols carved into its walls, glowing with soft blue light. As he got closer, a door opened without making any sound. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of something like mint mixed with metal inside the building. Jake found himself in a hall so large that his footsteps echoed like thunder. The walls were covered in more glowing symbols, and the ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. Strange plants grew in pots along the walls, their leaves changing colors as he walked past them. At the far end of the hall sat a throne made of what looked like living crystal. It pulsed with gentle light, and Jake could see veins of silver running through it like blood vessels. On the throne sat Princess Lirelei of House Zephyr, and Jake had to fight the urge to step backward. The princess was 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished marble. She had 4 arms, each one graceful and strong, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, colored like deep ocean water. Her hair flowed around her head like she was underwater, and it changed from blue to green to purple as Jake watched. Around the throne stood other Zephyrians, all of them tall and beautiful and dangerous. They wore robes that seemed to be made of light itself and jewelry that floated around their bodies without touching their skin. Jake counted at least 20 of them, and he knew each one could probably kill him with their bare hands. "So," Princess Lirelei said, her voice like music but with sharp edges, "this is what Earth sends to negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire." She spoke in perfect English, though Jake knew it was not her real language. Her words came from a small device attached to her throat that translated her thoughts into human speech. The princess leaned forward on her throne, studying Jake like a scientist looking at a bug under a microscope. "Tell me, little human, what makes you think you can speak for your entire species?" Jake kept his voice steady. "Your Highness, I come here as a representative of the Earth Defense Corps and the United Colonies. I carry the authority to negotiate a peace treaty between our peoples." The princess laughed, and the sound filled the enormous hall like bells ringing. The other Zephyrians joined in, their laughter mixing together into something that made Jake's teeth ache. "Peace treaty," she repeated, still laughing. "Between our peoples, how amusing." She stood up from her throne, and Jake realized she was even taller than he had thought. Her shadow fell across him like a dark cloud. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Captain Morrison? I am sure you will tell me, Your Highness. I see a primitive creature hiding inside a metal shell. I see a species so weak that they cannot survive without their crude technology. I see a race that mistakes brutality for bravery and thinks that destroying things makes them strong." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would not help Earth. Getting angry would not save the 3 billion people who were depending on him. "Your people," the princess continued, walking in a circle around Jake, "are like children playing with weapons they do not understand. You spread across the galaxy like a disease, taking what does not belong to you, And when someone tries to stop you, you cry about unfairness. The other Zephyrs nodded and made sounds of agreement. Jake could feel their eyes on him, studying his every move. His armor's sensors were picking up elevated heart rates and brain activity from all of them. They were excited like predators watching wounded prey. "I have studied your military records," Princess Lirale said, stopping in front of Jake. "Your wars, your battles, your great victories. Do you know what I learned?" Jake said nothing. "I learned that humans are cowards. You fight from a distance with your bombs and your bullets. You hide behind your armor and your shields. You never face your enemies with honor, as true warriors should." The princess returned to her throne and sat down gracefully. "But I am feeling generous today, Captain Morrison. I will give you a chance to prove that humans are more than just scared animals hiding behind technology." Jake's helmet display showed his heart rate increasing. Whatever the princess was about to propose, it would not be good for him or for Earth. "Remove your armor," she said, her voice carrying across the hall like a command from a god. "Face me in single combat. Show me this legendary human courage without your technological crutches. Prove to me that your species deserves to exist in the same galaxy as the Zephyrian Empire." The hall fell completely silent except for the gentle humming of the alien technology around them. Jake could hear his own breathing inside his helmet, and he could feel sweat beginning to form on his forehead. In his earpiece, Commander Hayes' voice crackled with static. "Captain Morrison, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." This is clearly a trap, but Jake was not thinking about traps. He was thinking about the 3 billion humans who would die if these talks failed. He was thinking about the children on Earth who would never grow up if war came. He was thinking about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of beings who saw humans as nothing more than clever animals. Jake's hand moved slowly toward the release mechanism on his helmet. Jake's fingers touched the helmet release button but did not press it. He stood perfectly still in the center of the crystal hall, surrounded by beings who could tear him apart without breaking a sweat. The princess watched him with those deep, ocean eyes, waiting to see what the human would do. "I am waiting, Captain Morrison," Princess Lirale said, her voice echoing off the glowing walls. "Or perhaps you are having second thoughts about proving your species' worth?" The other Zephyrians laughed again, but this time it sounded more like growling. They moved closer, forming a circle around Jake. He could see their muscles tense under their flowing robes, ready to spring into action if he tried to run or fight. In his earpiece, Commander Hayes' voice came through more clearly now. "Jake, listen to me. The princess is 8 feet tall and has 4 arms. Her bones are 3 times denser than yours. Her reaction time is twice as fast as any human. This is not a fair fight." Jake knew all of this already. The briefing files had been very clear about Zephyrian physical capabilities. They were born warriors, genetically enhanced by thousands of years of evolution on a high-gravity world. A single Zephyrian could easily defeat 10 trained human soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. "Fair fight?" Jake said quietly, just loud enough for the princess to hear. "Is that what you think this is about, Your Highness?" Princess Lirale tilted her head, her flowing hair shifting from blue to green. "What else would it be about? You humans always speak of honor and courage. Here is your chance to prove those words mean something." Jake looked around the hall at the assembled Zephyrians. Their faces showed excitement and anticipation, like people watching a sporting event where they already knew who would win. They expected him to refuse, to make excuses, to prove that humans were cowards just like the princess said. "You know," Jake said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "I have been thinking about what you said, about humans being cowards who hide behind technology." The princess leaned forward on her throne. "And what conclusion have you reached?" "I think you are right about some things. Humans do use technology to fight. We do attack from a distance when we can. We do hide behind armor and shields." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "But I think you misunderstand why we do these things." One of the Zephyrian nobles, a tall male with silver skin, stepped forward. "Enlighten us, human." Tell us why your species chooses cowardice over honor. Jake turned to face the noble. Because we are not stupid. Because we know that dead heroes cannot protect the people they love. Because we learned a long time ago that the only victory that matters is the one where you go home alive. The princess made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been disgust. So you admit it. Humans are cowards who value their own lives over honor. No, Jake said, his voice getting stronger. We are a species that learned to survive. Do you know what happens to warrior races that only value honor and courage? They go extinct. They die gloriously in battles that do not matter, fighting enemies who are smarter and more patient. The hall fell silent again. Several of the Zephyrians exchanged glances, and Jake could see uncertainty in their eyes for the first time. You want to know about human courage? Jake continued. Let me tell you about the Battle of New Geneva. 5,000 human civilians against 50,000 Krillian shock troops. The civilians had no military training, no proper weapons, no hope of winning. But they fought anyway, because their children were hiding in the shelters behind them. Princess. Liralay's expression had changed. The amusement was gone, replaced by something that looked like interest. The civilians held for 6 hours, Jake said. 6 hours against an enemy that should have overrun them in 6 minutes? Do you know how they did it? They used every dirty trick they could think of. They collapsed buildings to create choke points. They used mining equipment as weapons. They turned their own city into a death trap. Jake started walking slowly around the circle of Zephyrians, and to his surprise, they stepped back to let him pass. When the Krillians finally broke through the last defense line, they found that the civilians had booby-trapped the entire shelter complex. Rather than let their children be captured, the humans brought the whole thing down on top of themselves. Is not courage, the silver-skinned noble said, but his voice lacked conviction. That is madness. That is love, Jake replied. That is what humans fight for. Not glory, not honor, not to prove how strong we are. We fight because we love something more than we love ourselves. Princess Liralay stood up from her throne again, but this time she did not seem as tall or as intimidating. And what do you love, Captain Morrison? What drives you to come here and risk your life for a peace that may not even be possible? Jake stopped walking and faced her directly. I love the little girl who lives next door to my apartment on Earth. She is 7 years old, and she wants to be a doctor when she grows up. I love the old man who runs the coffee shop on Base Station Alpha. He tells the same jokes every day, and they are never funny. But he keeps trying. He paused, remembering faces from across human space. I love the teacher who works in the colonies, trying to give children hope for the future. I love the engineer who designed the water recycling systems that keep our people alive. I love a janitor who cleans the halls of the government building and always says good morning to everyone he meets. The princess was staring at him now, her ocean-colored eyes wide with something that might have been surprise. You want me to take off my armor and fight you? Jake said. You want me to prove that humans are brave by doing something stupid that will get me killed and accomplish nothing. But I have already proven my courage just by coming here. Jake reached up and activated his helmet's external speakers so his voice would carry clearly to every corner of the hall. I left behind everything I love to come to this place and try to make peace with people who hate me. I walked into a room full of beings who could kill me without thinking twice about it. I did this knowing that if I fail, everyone I care about will die. He looked around the circle of Zephyrians, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. That is human courage, Your Highness. Not the courage to die in glorious battle, but the courage to live with the consequences of our choices. The courage to do what needs to be done, even when it is not heroic or honorable or fair. Princess Liralay was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. And what needs to be done now, Captain Morrison? Jake's hand moved to his helmet release mechanism once more, but this time his movement was deliberate and confident. Now I show you what humans really are when we take off our armor. The click of the release mechanism echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. The helmet came off with a soft hiss as the air seals released. Jake held it in his hands for a moment, feeling the weight of it before setting it down on the crystal floor. The sound it made was small in the enormous hall, but every Zephyrian in the room heard it clearly. Princess Lirelei had expected to see weakness when the human removed his protection. She had expected to see pale skin and soft features, the face of a creature that had never known real hardship. Instead, she found herself looking at something that made her take a step backward. Jake Morrison's face was a map of violence and survival. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, white against his tanned skin. His nose had been broken at least twice and healed crooked. His right eye was surrounded by old burn marks from some kind of energy weapon. His hair was cut short and showed streaks of gray, even though he could not be older than 35, but it was his eyes that made the princess feel something she had not experienced in many years. Fear, not fear of physical harm, but fear of understanding. Jake's eyes held depths that spoke of things no living being should have to see. They were the eyes of someone who had walked through hell and kept walking, not because he was brave, but because stopping meant that other people would have to walk through hell instead. "This is what you wanted to see," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent hall without amplification. "This is what a human looks like when we take off our armor." The Zephyrian nobles murmured among themselves, their earlier confidence shaken. The silver-skinned male who had spoken before stepped closer, studying Jake's scarred face with new interest. "You have seen much battle, human. But scars do not make you strong. They only prove that you have been hurt." Jake nodded slowly. "You are right. Scars do not make you strong. But surviving what gives you those scars, that might teach you something about strength." He began to remove the rest of his armor, piece by piece. The chest plate came off first, revealing more scars across his arms and shoulders. Then the arm guards, showing old burn marks and what looked like claw marks from some alien predator. Each piece of armor that hit the floor revealed more evidence of a life spent in constant danger. "Tell me about this one," Princess Lirelei sighed, pointing to a particularly large scar that ran across Jake's left shoulder and down his arm. "Proxima Centauri," Jake replied without hesitation. 3 years ago, we were defending a colony world against raiders. A Vorthek boarding party broke through our lines and got into the civilian shelters. I went in after them. The princess knew about the Vorthek. They were 7-foot-tall insectoid creatures with natural armor and razor-sharp claws. A single Vorthek warrior could tear through a dozen human soldiers in close combat. "How many did you face?" "6. And you survived?" Jake's expression did not change. "I had to." "There were children in those shelters." 37 children between the ages of 4 and 12. The Vorthek do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They kill everything they find. He continued removing his armor, revealing more scars, more stories written in damaged flesh. "You want to know about human strength? I will tell you about strength. Strength is not being the biggest or the fastest or the most dangerous. Strength is being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." The leg armor came off next, showing where shrapnel had torn through Jake's left thigh. "This one was from the defensive Titan station. We were outnumbered 50-1. Command told us to hold the line for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. We held for 18 hours. Do you know why?" The princess shook her head, unable to speak, because behind us was a hospital ship full of wounded civilians. Women and children and old people who could not fight, could not run, could not do anything but trust us to protect them. So we did. We held that line until our weapons ran out of ammunition. Then we held it with knives and rocks and our bare hands if we had to. Jake was standing now in just his basic uniform, all of his armor scattered around him on the crystal floor. Without the bulk of the tactical gear, he looked smaller, more vulnerable. But somehow he also looked more dangerous than he had before. "You think humans are weak because we use technology to fight," Jake said, his voice growing stronger. "But you do not understand what technology means to us. It is not a crutch. It is not something we hide behind. It is a tool that lets us fight enemies we have no business fighting. He gestured to the armor around his feet. This armor is not just protection. It is hope. It is the hope that maybe, just maybe, I can survive long enough to save one more person. Maybe I can hold the line one more time. Maybe I can buy just enough time for the people I love to get to safety. Princess Lirale was staring at him now with something that looked like wonder. But why? Why do you do this? Why do you throw your life away for people you do not even know? Jake looked directly into her ocean-colored eyes. Because if I do not, who will? Because every child deserves to grow up. Because every old person deserves to die peacefully in their sleep, not screaming in fear. Because every person trying to make the galaxy a better place deserves the chance to succeed. He paused, letting his words sink in. You asked me to prove? That humans are more than scared animals hiding behind technology. I cannot do that by fighting you. Fighting you would prove nothing except that I'm willing to die for no good reason. The hall was completely silent now. Even the gentle humming of the alien technology seemed to have stopped. The Zephyrians stood frozen, processing what they had heard and seen. You want to know what human courage looks like? Jake continued. It looks like a teacher who goes to work every day in a war zone because children need to learn. It looks like a doctor who stays at his post during a plague because people need healing. It looks like a soldier who takes off his armor in a room full of enemies because sometimes the only way to show strength is to show vulnerability. Jake began walking slowly toward the princess, and to everyone's surprise, she did not move away. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced. But we are the species that refuses to give up. We are the species that fights not because we want to, but because we have to. We are the species that will walk into hell itself if it means the people we love get to see another sunrise. He stopped directly in front of her throne, looking up at her towering form. That is what you are really fighting, Your Highness. Not our weapons or our ships or our technology. You are fighting our refusal to let the things we care about die. And that is a war you cannot win, no matter how strong you are. Princess Lirale stared down at the scarred human standing before her, and for the first time in her life, she began to understand what true strength really meant. Jake stood in the center of the crystal hall, surrounded by his scattered armor, facing Princess Lirale without any protection. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. The other Zephyrians watched with wide eyes, waiting to see what would happen next. The princess reached for the ceremonial blade at her side. The weapon was beautiful and deadly, its edge sharp enough to cut through human bone like paper. The handle was carved from some kind of alien wood that glowed with soft light, and the blade itself seemed to hum with energy. You have shown me your scars, human, she said, her voice quieter than before but still carrying the authority of someone born to rule. You have told me your stories, but stories and scars do not change the fact that you are standing in my court, making demands of my people. Jake did not move as she drew the blade. The weapon caught the light from the crystal walls and threw rainbow patterns across the floor. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady and calm, despite the danger. I am not making demands, Your Highness. I am offering a choice. The princess stepped down from her throne, the blade held loosely in her lower right hand. What choice is that? The choice between understanding and ignorance, between wisdom and pride, between a future where our children learn from each other and a future where they die fighting each other. One of the Zephyrian nobles, a female with golden skin and silver hair, spoke up. You speak of children, human, but your species has no children here. Your nearest colony is 12 light years away. What do you care if our children live or die? Jake turned to face her, and she took a step back at the intensity in his scarred face. Because children are children, no matter what species they belong to. Because a mother's tears sound the same in every language. Because when a child dies, a little bit of hope dies with them. He looked around the hall at all the assembled Zephyrians. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see people who have forgotten what it means to be afraid. You are all so strong, so powerful, So confident in your abilities that you have forgotten why strength matters in the first place. Princess Lirley raised the blade higher, its point now aimed at Jake's chest. And why does strength matter, according to humans? To protect weakness, to shield the innocent, to give hope to those who have none. Jake's voice grew stronger. With each word, strength without purpose is just destruction. Power without compassion is just tyranny. You have both strength and power, but you have forgotten how to use them for anything except conquest. The silver-skinned noble who had spoken earlier stepped forward. You dare to lecture us about conquest? Your species has spread across the galaxy like a plague, taking worlds that do not belong to you, forcing your culture on others. You speak of protection and hope, but your actions show only greed and ambition. Jake nodded slowly. You are right. Humans have done terrible things. We have taken worlds that did not belong to us. We have forced our ways on others. We have made mistakes that cost innocent lives. He paused, meeting the noble's eyes. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have changed. We have become better than we were. The princess lowered her blade slightly. And what makes you think we should believe that? Because I am standing here in your court without armor or weapons, trying to make peace instead of war. Because my government sent a soldier to negotiate instead of a diplomat. Because the people of Earth chose to try one more time to find a peaceful solution, even after you destroyed 5 of our colonies. Jake began walking slowly around the circle of Zephyrians again, but this time his movement was different. He was not showing off or trying to intimidate. He was simply sharing space with them, person to person, being to being. You want to know what humans learned from our mistakes. We learned that winning is not about being the strongest or the smartest or the most ruthless. Winning is about being the species that others want to exist alongside. Winning is about building something better than what came before. The golden-skinned female noble tilted her head. And what would you build with us, human? What future do you see for our species together? Jake stopped walking and faced her directly. I see Zephyrian artists working with human engineers to create buildings that are both beautiful and functional. I see human doctors learning from Zephyrian healers to cure diseases that have plagued both our species. I see children, both human and Zephyrian, growing up together and learning that the differences between us make us stronger, not weaker. Princess Lirley was studying him with those deep ocean eyes, and Jake could see conflict there. The blade in her hand trembled slightly as if she was fighting with herself about whether to use it. But most of all, Jake continued, I see 2 species that choose to build instead of destroy. 2 species that choose to heal instead of hurt. 2 species that choose to hope instead of fear. He walked back to where his helmet sat on the crystal floor and picked it up. The metal was cool in his hands, familiar and comforting. You offered me single combat to prove human courage. But I do not need to prove anything to you. I already know what I am capable of. I already know what humans are capable of. The princess raised her blade again, pointing it at Jake's heart. Then why will you not fight me? Jake looked at the blade, then at the princess, then at all the Zephyrians watching them, because fighting you would be easy. Standing here, trying to make you understand, trying to find a way for our people to live together in peace, that is hard. Any fool can throw a punch. It takes wisdom to know when not to fight. He began walking toward the great doors at the far end of the hall, carrying his helmet under his arm. His scattered armor pieces remained on the floor where he had left them, forgotten and unimportant. Where are you going? Princess Lirley called after him, her voice carrying a note of confusion and something that might have been panic. Jake paused at the threshold of the doors, his back still turned to the princess and her court. I am going home, Your Highness. I am going back to the people who sent me here with hope in their hearts. I am going to tell them that I tried to make peace, but that some people prefer war. You would leave? Just like that? The princess sounded genuinely shocked. I offered you honorable combat. I gave you the chance to prove your worth before the court of the Zephyrian Empire. You would walk away from that honor? Jake turned his head slightly, just enough so she could see his profile. Your Highness, I have been proving my worth since I was old enough to hold a weapon. I have proven it on a dozen worlds against enemies that would give your empire nightmares. I do not need to prove anything to you or to anyone else. He faced forward again, toward the doors and the purple sky beyond. But more than that, I choose not to fight you because fighting you would accomplish nothing. If I win, your people will say I cheated or got lucky. If I lose, they will say it proves humans are weak. Either way, we are no closer to peace. Princess Lirelei took a step forward, her blade still in her hand. And what if I decide to strike you down as you leave? What if I kill you here and now for the insult you have shown my court? Jake's voice drifted back to her, calm and steady. Then you will prove everything I said about the difference between strength and wisdom. And Earth will know that the Zephyrian Empire chose war over peace, chose pride over understanding, chose death over life. He walked through the doors and into the alien sunlight, leaving the princess and her court standing in stunned silence behind him. Jake walked across the purple grass toward his shuttle, the alien suns warm on his back. He could feel the eyes of the Zephyrians watching him from the Crystal Palace, but he did not turn around. His helmet felt heavy in his hands, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. All the battles he had fought, all the people he had tried to save, all the hope he had carried across the galaxy dot behind him. Princess Lirelei stood frozen in the doorway of her throne room. The ceremonial blade hung loose in her hand, forgotten. Her ocean-colored eyes were fixed on the human walking away from her, walking away from everything she thought she understood about strength and courage and honor. Princess, the silver-skinned noble said quietly, should we pursue him? Should we make him pay for the insult he has shown our court? Lirelei did not answer. She was thinking about the scars on Jake's body, about the stories he had told, about the way his eyes had looked when he spoke of children and hope and sacrifice. She was thinking about things she had never considered before. Jake reached his shuttle and paused with his hand on the door. He turned on his communication device and spoke to Commander Hayes, who was waiting in orbit above the planet. Commander, this is Captain Morrison. Mission status is complete. Returning to the ship. Jake, what happened down there? Did you make contact with the princess? Are they willing to negotiate? Jake looked back at the Crystal Palace, where he could still see the tall figure of Princess Lirelei standing in the doorway. I made contact. As for negotiation, that will be up to them now. He climbed into the shuttle and began the pre-flight sequence. The engines hummed to life, and the small ship lifted off from the purple grass. As it rose into the orange sky, Jake could see the palace growing smaller below him, but he could still make out the princess standing there. Watching him leave, inside the palace, the Zephyrian court was in chaos. The nobles talked over each other, their voices rising in anger and confusion. Some demanded that they send ships to shoot down the human shuttle. Others argued that they should contact the human fleet and declare war immediately. A few, the wisest among them, said nothing at all. Princess Lirelei walked slowly back to her throne, the blade still in her hand. She sat down heavily, feeling tired in a way she had never experienced before. The golden-skinned female noble approached her cautiously. Princess, what are your orders? How shall we respond to this human's arrogance? Lirelei looked at the blade. In her hand, its edge sharp enough to cut through anything. She had trained with weapons like this since she was a child. She had learned to fight before she learned to walk. Combat was as natural to her as breathing, and she had never met an enemy she could not defeat. But Jake Morrison had not been an enemy, she realized. He had been something else entirely, something she did not have a word for in her language. Tell me, she said to the assembled court, what did you see when the human removed his armor? The silver-skinned noble stepped forward. I saw weakness. Princess, I saw a creature dependent on technology for survival, just as you said. And what else? The noble hesitated. I saw ... scars, many scars, yes, and what do those scars tell us? The court was quiet for a moment. Finally, the golden-skinned female spoke. They tell us he has survived many battles. Survived, princess? Lirelei repeated. Not one? Survived? Do you understand the difference? She stood up from her throne and walked to the great windows that looked out over her world. In the distance, she could see Jake's shuttle disappearing into the orange sky, heading for the stars and the ship that would take him home, winning. A battle means you were stronger than your enemy, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Surviving a battle means you were smart enough to keep fighting when strength was not enough. The court listened in silence as their princes continued. That human came here knowing he could not win a fight against me. He knew that even if he somehow defeated me, my guards would kill him before he could leave this room. He knew that. Accepting my challenge would accomplish nothing except his own death. She turned away from the window to face her people. And yet he still came. He still stood before us without weapons or armor. He still tried to make us understand something we had never considered before. The silver-skinned noble shook his head. But Princess, he showed you disrespect. He insulted our court by refusing to fight. Surely this cannot be allowed to stand. Princess Lirelei walked back to her throne, but she did not sit down. Instead, she placed the ceremonial blade on the crystal surface and stepped away from it. He did not insult our court, she said quietly. He honored it. He honored it by believing we were wise enough to understand his message. He honored it by trusting us with the truth instead of giving us the pretty lies we expected to hear. She looked around at all the confused faces of her nobles and felt something she had not experienced in many years, doubt, not doubt about her strength or her ability to rule, but doubt about whether strength and rule were the most important things in the galaxy. Hours passed. The court dispersed, the nobles returning to their duties and their homes, but Princess Lirelei remained in the throne room. She stood at the great windows, looking up at the stars where Jake Morrison's ship was carrying him back to Earth. A soft chime announced an incoming message from the human fleet. On the communication screen appeared the face of a woman in a military uniform. Your Highness, I am Commander Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Corps. Captain Morrison has asked me to deliver a message to you. Princess Lirelei nodded. I am listening. The Captain wanted you to know that humans do not fight to prove how strong we are. We fight to prove how strong we can become. He also wanted you to know that the offer of peace remains open should you choose to accept it. The communication screen went dark, leaving Princess Lirelei alone with her thoughts. She walked to where Jake had left his armor scattered across the crystal floor. Piece by piece, she picked up the tactical gear, feeling its weight, studying its construction. The armor was not crude, as she had first thought. It was sophisticated, designed not just for protection but for communication, for coordination with other soldiers, for helping its wearer help others. It was not the equipment of a coward hiding from battle. It was the equipment of someone who had learned that surviving the battle was more important than winning it. Princess Lirelei found herself laughing, but this time it was not the mocking laughter she had shared with her court. This time it was the laughter of someone who had learned something new, something important, something that changed the way she saw the world. Jake Morrison had challenged her to single combat, and she had expected him to prove his worth through violence. Instead, he had proven something far more valuable. He had proven that sometimes the greatest courage was knowing when not to fight. The next morning, Princess Lirelei sent a message to the human fleet. The message was simple and direct, containing only 4 words that would change the course of history for both their species. Let us talk peace. And in the communication logs of both fleets, that message was recorded with a timestamp that marked the beginning of a new era. An era where 2 species chose understanding over conflict, where they chose to build together instead of destroy each other, where they chose to prove their strength not through war, but through the wisdom to walk away from it. Jake Morrison never knew that his walk away from that crystal throne room had accomplished more than any battle ever could. But somewhere in the galaxy, children of both species would grow up in a world where the greatest heroes were not the ones who fought the hardest, but the ones who knew when to stop fighting and start building something better.